Well, I'm going to bring to you two contemporary koans, and I think I'm going to get whiplash looking side to side here. So if I don't actually make eye contact, forgive me, because it's kind of weird. Two contemporary koans about Deepa Ma. And I think a couple months ago, Chris talked some about the life of Deepa Ma. I don't know if you remember, though. So I'll bring you up to date, because I love Deepa Ma. I never met her, of course. She's been dead since 1980 something and lived in India anyway. But she just, somehow I feel her in my heart. And so I've got to tell you a little about her, because it bears on the koans. She was born in 1911 in, I guess, the Bengal state that's now Bangladesh, well, not India, now it's Bangladesh, but that's where she was born. And at age 12, she was married, an arranged marriage, to a man 12 years older than herself. He immediately took off to do business in Burma, and she was shunted over to live with her mother-in-law's family for 2 years. And imagine that, 12 to 14 years old, just with strange family, and it had a really hard time. She really suffered, sad, and just really hard. And then he sent for her, and she went, after 2 years, over to Burma and lived with her husband there. And she was still adjusting to life there when her mother suddenly died. And so she felt just really deep grief. And then at that same time, they tried to have children, and she was unable to have children. She had miscarriages and then lost a couple children. They were born and then they died as infants. So just really painful early life. And then eventually she and her husband adopted her much younger brother to raise. But she was still having a lot of trouble with depression. And he suggested to her that even though it was an arranged marriage, they had a marriage of love. They really connected. And he suggested to her that she treat every person she met as her own child. And apparently that helped some. And, that's kind of a cool thing. That's like, some of our other teachings we've had, like we've been each other's mothers forever, or children. So really bringing that to each person, that helped some. But then her husband died. Well, no, she got pregnant and did have a daughter. And then soon after, her husband suddenly died. And that really just threw her for a loop. She was a mess. And she was in her mid-40s. She got high blood pressure. Her heart was having lots of problems. She couldn't get out of bed. She was, a real mess. And this is important because she was knowing that she suffered so much. And then what happened next is really important. Well, so she decided she was just going to go meditate and go to a monastery. She made arrangements to leave her daughter with someone else, and she went. And it turns out she really could just settle down and go into deep meditation pretty well. But after about a day or two at the monastery, she got severely bitten by a dog and was sent back to her home, and her daughter was so distraught she just really didn't want her mother to leave again. So Deepa Ma knew that she had to do meditation in order to save her life. And she couldn't go to the monastery. So she got instruction, used the instruction she'd gotten for a short time, and then did deepen, and her physical problems resolved. And she began to really learn to be a householder with a deep meditation practice. And I like this because for all of us, we're householders, right? We live in this present world. And she was famous for then saying, you can meditate anywhere, anytime. And so in my mind, she was what I like to aspire to, I don't know if I do it very well, to be a monk in the world. And so she eventually, with her daughter, moved to Calcutta, and that's where they set up housekeeping and raised a whole lot of kids. And she started taking in students and things. And she always asked them, how are you feeling? Are you feeling well? Are you getting enough to eat? How's your sleep? She was very concerned about that. And she always said, know what you are doing. Always know what you are doing. Like, be present. You cannot separate meditation from life. And she told this one businessman who said, oh, I can't meditate, I'm too busy. She says, if you're busy, then busyness is the meditation. And when you do calculations, know that you are doing calculations. Meditation is always possible, at any time. And if you're rushing to the office, then you should be mindful of rushing. And I think about that when I'm driving around and I get all wound up and I'm rushing. It brings me back. At least I know I'm rushing, I'm wound up, whatever. But that's kind of slows me down. And she blessed everything. She blessed every person she met, kind of from head to toe, blowing on them. She blew on them, she chanted, she stroked their hair. Touch was very important, and that brings us to the first koan. And I'm not going into either of these koans deeply. I just want to point to a couple things in each one. This one is Dipa Ma's Fearless Daughters. Dipa Ma was on an airplane, you've probably heard this one, with a woman student. It was very turbulent, and the woman screamed. Dipa Ma was sitting across the aisle and took the student's hand and held it. It makes a difference. She just reached out and touched her and held it. And then she whispered, the daughters of the Buddha are fearless. But I think it was the touch first. That touch that grounded this student. Yes, she was frightened, but the touch brought her back to her body, to the present moment, to the sensations of the present moment. And the fearlessness, a daughter or a son, Wayne, of the Buddha is fearless. I think it means that it's like you could say a daughter of awakening, because I often substitute Buddha for awakening. So a daughter of awakening, knowing that we're interconnected and awake in every moment. When we come back, ground in that, even though we're fearful, we're fearless. We're right there. But touch is important, and I wanted to ask you to think about people or times, anybody who's ever reached out and touched you, and it's settled you, brought you into the sensations of the moment, or maybe you've reached out and touched someone else. And I can think of a time when my father died suddenly, and we all went back to Indiana to see and my mom was there, and we were going to have a funeral. And I walked in, I hadn't seen my mom, and she's on the couch, and I sit by her, and she grabs my hand, and I grab hers, and we hold on tight. And there weren't a lot of words. All that we needed was that physical touch to bring us into that connection with each other. And then another time, I was at, probably my second session with Everyday Zen, and I was cleaning up some altar stuff in the evening, and I bent down and I bashed my head on something because I was in a hurry, and there's blood gushing everywhere. And it ended up that Chris, our dear Chris Fortin, took me to the emergency room at Kaiser and sat with me while I got 8 stitches. But I was having a hard time with it because the guy couldn't get enough Novocaine in. He had to give me a few shots to numb me up. And she saw the pain. Chris was sitting by me, and she just reached over and took my hand. And that, I don't know, that just changed everything for me. She didn't have to say anything like, oh, calm down, oh, breathe, oh, this or that. It's just the touch. She took my hand. I just, that's the power of this story, is touch. Let's not forget to touch each other. And maybe think just right now, just for a moment, of when you have been touched, somebody's reached out, taken your hand, and that sensation of calming, coming back to yourself. Or if you've ever done that for someone. And if you don't have an instance that comes to you, maybe just use Deepa Ma and this woman on the airplane, and imagine it and let it become full inside you. And maybe through this next week, work with that. So that's all I want to say about this koan. The second one, I only want to say a very little bit about it. It's called, if I can find it, Deepa Ma and the Thief. I like this one too. Well, I like all of them. I love Deepa Ma. A student of Deepa Ma had his radio stolen from his car, something that had happened to him several times before. When he told Deepa Ma, she burst out laughing. "What's so funny?" the student asked. Deepa Ma answered, "You must have been a thief in a former lifetime. How many more times do you think you will need to have your radio stolen? What did you do? What was your reaction when the car was broken into?" The student replied, "I was really angry because it's happened so many times." She looked at him in amazement. "You mean you didn't even think about the man who took your radio? How sad his life must be." And she closed her eyes and started chanting quietly to herself, offering metta for the thief. Well, there's probably a lot that can be said about this koan, but I only want to point out on these lines. The student replied, "I was really angry because it's happened so many times." And then she looked at him in amazement. "You mean you didn't even think about the man who took your radio? How sad his life must be." And I can completely relate to this. I think of how many times I read the paper or something's happened and I'm just railing about these stupid politicians and I hate them or this or that. And I'm just winding up. And then they do another thing and I wind up again. Or I'm also thinking about, I've talked before about living in co-housing. It's like not easy. It's great, but it's not easy always. And various people will just really grate on me from time to time. I suppose I grate on them too, right? And I'm thinking of one person in particular recently, and I've been working with this practice of when I start to wind up with how mad I am and how justified I am, how right I am, I have a reason. It's all about me, right? All about me, and I should be angry, and well, maybe there are reasons to be upset, but I get lost in that train of thought. So I come back. I have been practicing this where I will offer metta for that person, and then for myself. But offering metta for them helps calm me and realize that we're all just doing our best, and we come with our own karma, our own traumas, and we're just doing the best we can. And it helps me. Often something will arise that helps me know how to speak to that person or meet them in a way that can solve our differences. And I know I've pissed off lots of people, and I hope maybe some of them have sent some metta for me, toward me from their point of view, knowing that I have my own triggers and trauma and that I mess up. And we do that for each other. I think that's the essence of this koan. And to me, that's compassion in action. So that's what I wanted to bring you today. Thank you very much. And I think that Erika's next. Can't see you, Erika, but I trust you're there.
Yes, hi. Hi, everybody. I am here. How's the sound? Is that okay? It sounds like a little echoey, but
All right.
should be better now. Yeah. So good. Well, thank you, Marianne. I think we'll overlap some on our themes. We'll see how it goes. So what I wanted, the story I wanted to bring forth is Zhayang's Earth, China's 17th century, and this is on page 241. And I read it, I think when I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago, I just read it briefly, but I wanted to kind of go into it more. And so this is the case. A monk asked Master Zhayang Chengru, 30 blows, are they the actions of a man or an enlightened being? Zhayang replied, just as long as the fellow isn't beaten to death. The monk said, when you speak, the congregation assembles like clouds. In the end, who is this great hero among women? Zhayang said, each and every person has the sky over their head. Each and everyone has the earth under their feet. The monk gave a shout, Klutz! Zhayang said, what is the point of recklessly shouting like that? The monk then bowed respectfully, and Zhayang said, the Dharma does not rise up alone. It can't emerge without reliance on the world. If I take up the challenge of speaking, I must surely borrow the light and the dark, the form and the emptiness of the mountains and hills and the great earth, the call of the magpies and the cries of the crows. The water flows and the flowers blossom, brilliantly preaching without ceasing. In this way, there is no restraint. So I guess first off on this, Con, I always go with, I think that the 30 blows and the shouting cuts and all that is very much a throwback from samurai time. And I feel that we can awaken, we can experience being in suchness, and we can help each other experience our beingness in much kinder, gentler ways than bopping each other over the head. So that's sort of first on it. And then I just love the poetry of the language of nature. I'm going to read also. So Eve in the book, the commentator is Eve Mionen Marco. I think was given Inca by Bernie Glassman, and I think I read she was married to him at one time. But anyway, she says, the monk asked about a great hero among women. Is this the real question? There certainly are great women ancestors whose names we've begun to recite in recent years. In our Sangha, the lineage chart for the transmission of precepts now incorporates a wheel of women ancestors. But do we pine for a great hero? Where do we seek inspiration? Zhayang tells the monk, each and every person has the sky over their head. Each and every one has has earth under their feet. In the end, it is up to us. That is why I remind those who are taking the precepts, living the precepts calls for each person's response to what spontaneously arises in their lives, not the emulation of a role model, no matter how worthy. I think that's a wonderful statement. And she goes on to say, but Zhayang says more than that. The Dharma does not rise up alone. It can't emerge without reliance on the world. To take up the challenge of speaking, to say the unsayable and express the inexpressible, one can't stay mute. As Zayang said, one must use everything: the language of dualism, the language of oneness, the smell of water, the sound of flowers, the aliveness of earth itself. Everything can be used as skillful means to deal with life's varied situations, as long as one is not attached to one side or the other. So the other, I guess what it reminds me of, or it was interesting because I picked this to talk about this story quite some time ago. And then this last week I was traveling, and this weekend, Earth Day, I went to Oklahoma and participated in the convening of the four winds, listening to the waters speak. It was a conference on rights of nature, indigenous-led conference. And it was really very wonderful and inspiring. And I think some of the language in this story really relates to it. In the main thrust of the conference is, switching our view from extractive policy of seeing the natural world as what can we get from it and how rich can we get and how much can we take, to that the earth is our mother, and how do we care for it, and how do we live in harmony with the earth, and that mountains and rivers are beings that are entities. And so our laws have created the fact that corporations are considered entities and can be defended as such. And so the argument is mountains and rivers should also be entities and defended as such. And so I also went because I'm a big fan of this Punkham elder named Casey Camp Hornick. She's been very active in water protecting here and stopping pipelines and for a long time. And so she was asked about, in the beginning of the conference, we were all asked to bring water from our homes. Like I brought water from the confluence of the South Platte and the Cherry Creek that go through Denver, and also brought up Colorado River. And so everyone brought water, and we poured it together and asked, blessings and prayers for the waters of the world, really. And then someone asked about grief and burnout, and how do you manage that? And so a number of times it was mentioned that there are ceremonies and songs and dances, and the ritual is what keeps people going. And I find that a connection with us, because that's what we say too. Our practice, our sitting practice, our philosophy is what we rely on as, when things are difficult, and how we step back into that. And then she said a great thing. She goes, well, you cannot pour water from an empty pitcher. Mm-hmm. You have to fill the pitcher if you're going to be able to fill other people's pitchers. And we say that too, in terms of like the metta meditation. We start out with, may this body, this being, be happy and well and fulfilled. May this person be at ease. And then from there, spread it out, and saying, well, you can't, offer what you don't actually have in the first place. And so she offered a very interesting meditation where she said, well, one thing that someone had done, when you first wake up in the morning and are grateful to have woken up for another day and are alive and breathing, one thing you can do first thing is just to check. She goes, step outside of yourself and look at your body, look at you from outside. We can all do this. We can kind of visualize. And then in your mind's eye, just walk around your whole person and look and say, well, what does this person need in terms of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual world? You know, how can what healing, what is needed today? I thought that was very beautiful. And another, you know, being a generalist, I always see where the interconnections are, you know, where traditions meet, where we agree. And one man was saying that, he said, well, when he was a young man, he thought that being a Cherokee man meant you were tough, you were a fighter, you were ready to fight and just be bad, you know. And that as he's grown and matured and developed in his own spirituality, he now says that being a Cherokee man means being kind. Means being kind. And, you know, I love this too, because what do we say? My religion is kindness, number one, you know. And so to come out of that from, you know, all the suffering that has been perpetrated on the Native American people is huge. You know, to be strong enough to be kind is a real place of strength, and really, you know, comes out of our own spirituality and understanding. And then he said, you know, when we pray, we don't pray for ourselves. We pray for everyone else. Just as Deepa Ma was saying, you know, we pray for the thief, and we pray for our families, our communities, for the world. But it's not all about me. It's about our interconnection with the greater, with the larger picture that we are, you know. Yeah. Casey Camp would also say, we're not defending nature. We're not defending the water. We are nature. We are the water. And it's so true. So those were some of my inspirations from this weekend. So I'm just going to read this last paragraph again and leave us with the end of this koan. The Dharma does not rise up alone. It can't emerge without reliance on the world. If I take up the challenge of speaking, I must surely borrow the light and the dark, the form and the emptiness, the mountains and hills and the great earth, the call of the magpies and the cries of the crows. The water flows and the flowers blossom, brilliantly preaching without ceasing. In this way, there is no restraint. So thank you. Yeah.
Erika, do you have a question you want for us to send people into groups with, or shall I suggest something?
Yeah, what, do you have a question?
No, I was going to suggest that we've shared quite a